this was this kind of this handoff from trusted person to trusted person. And like, I knew I could trust Dennis because I trusted Steven, via Mufa. It was an incredible experience. Just, it was very loving, very kind, very compassionate, and also just friendly. And at the before we left Victoria Falls, we actually went out to dinner with Mufa and his family. We had just become fast friends with them, and it was just very sweet, very loving. And that was one of those, wow, this is why we do this thing.
Everyone, and welcome to the African Overland channel. How is everybody doing? Hope you're excited for today. I've got two amazing guests with me, Joshua, a past traveler, and Lee, our very own Lee from African Overland Tours. Joshua, how are you doing?
Very fine, thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Lee?
I'm also really good, as usual.
I actually haven't had you on a webinar in a while. It's been great. I mean, when I first started...
It's great not having you.
No. It's great to have you back.
Oh, thank you.
But like, when I first started doing the podcasts and webinars for African Overland Tours, Lee was the first person that I had on a webinar, and she made me feel very comfortable. So the same way you felt with her, Joshua, in your first interactions with her.
Truly.
Let's hope, that I do aim.
Cool. So I want to start off on something really simple but really fun. Joshua, when I was burning the midnight oil yesterday, you asked me, what should I wear? And I was like, I'm probably going to be in a coat or something warm because it's cold here. But what are you going to wear? And you said you're going to wear a cool shirt. Give us a backstory behind the shirt that you're wearing. It looks beautiful.
Well, thank you. We started and finished our Africa Overland Tour with drifters in Johannesburg. And when we returned to Johannesburg, we planned our trip to have a Sunday morning at Rose Market. And we had heard that this was this fantastic flea market. And so we wandered around there and found this clothing area, which none of us were particularly interested in, but a couple of shirts caught my eye. So we started paging through the shirts and found this one and a couple of others. But the owner of this little shop was really excited to tell us the story about this shirt. And apparently when Nelson Mandela was making these types of shirts very popular after he was out of prison, the South African textile industry wasn't quite making shirts yet, at least like this. And so they had imported them from some other places. Well, the story goes that there was a large truck or bin or something of these shirts that had been brought in like the 80s, but had been stored and never opened. And so this was a brand new shirt, but from the 80s when they were first being popularized by Nelson Mandela. And so I just love that little bit of history of this and a couple other shirts I brought home with me.
Oh, that's epic. That's all. I mean, everybody needs a Madiba shirt when they come to visit. It's like a rite of passage.
Yeah.
So at least you've got one. Did your partner also take one?
Yep. Jay grabbed, we both grabbed 3 actually.
I'm sure it's a good conversation starter when you're around your friends. And I'm sure you shared, your stories with your friends about your trip. Because obviously it seems like travel is what you do with your nephews and your nieces. And one of the things that stood out after your tour is you obviously submitted a review to us. Thank you so much. And you said that planning a safari felt nothing like shopping for a sweater on Amazon, which I'm sure is pretty true. But what sparked your dream of actually going to Africa? How did it feel? And how did you push past that first few feelings of overwhelm?
Sure. Well, first, I'll just quick tell you that my husband Jay and I have committed to taking each of our 4 nieces and nephew on a trip to a country of their choice when they're in their 17, 18 time. And it's not just anywhere, but we want them to go to somewhere in Asia, Africa, or South America. And the reason we've kind of got that little limitation on there is because, hey, they'll probably go to Europe when they're in college, right? That's cool. And Australia is very similar to where I'm from in the United States. So we wanted to take them somewhere really different. So this was our 3rd trip, actually, with one of our young people. And our niece, Hannah, is an animal nut. She just has, I think she was born with kittens in her hand. She just loves animals. And wanted to go somewhere different, wanted to go somewhere that her siblings and cousins had not gone before, and the African continent was actually that place. And then she just started looking around, and the way we kind of work this is each of the kids gets to, kind of pick 5 countries and then winnow it down. And eventually we found Botswana. It's an interesting process how we got there, but that's how we found this place. The not shopping like sweater on Amazon comment was simply because once we landed on going to Botswana, and that's the place that she wanted to visit, then it became incredibly overwhelming. Google searches were nearly not helpful because it was just, I didn't know what I was getting myself into, right? That's really where that came from.
That's a good way to describe it. And obviously, when you're shopping on things like Amazon, you're filled with so many options. Sometimes you don't really know what you're looking for. Like you said, you settled on a destination, yes, but you didn't really know how to navigate it. And you mentioned that there were so many choices. There were private tours, group tours, different countries to explore, whether you were going to overland or fly in. And what felt like the biggest hurdle in those early stages for you?
So I'll tell you kind of how that all started, because it was this that overwhelm came from my initial searches. So Hannah, our niece, says, I want to go to Botswana, and we plan all this together, but I do a lot of the like the financial, like how are we going to do this kind of thing. And so I start looking for tours, like at least let's get us started. And so African Safari, it's the first thing I searched for. And I remember walking down to my husband and saying, I don't think we can afford this. Like, this is crazy town. This is $1,000 a person a night kind of stuff. I'm like, what the is going on here? I guess we just hadn't really realized like that. So obviously the Google was searching or serving up these really high end kind of trips. So he's like, okay, how about go try, this is the best place. How about go try, see if there's some LGBT friendly ones. So I go up and I start finding these, queer friendly tours. And I came back down and I said, our people have not helped. They're even more expensive. It's like, oh dear. So what are we going to do with this? And then I eventually start searching for just kind of broadening my search. And that's when I discovered that all of the tours, these expensive tours I was looking at, were the fly-in kind, or more on the luxury glamping kind. And that's actually, the expense is one thing, but it's just not what we wanted to do anyway. And so then I discovered the term overland, and that suddenly got rid of a lot of the options we weren't looking for and started feeling like, oh, we could do this. So I talked with my niece about it, and I said, hey, we could do one of these fly-ins, one of these high-end tours. And but we could probably do about 2 or 3 days of them. And then, but we've got this other options that are longer, but there's more car time, but it's a longer trip. And Hannah just immediately said, oh, we're going to be in Africa, we're going camping. And so that was what really helped us zero in on the kind of tour we wanted. And then we found African Overland.
Well, we're glad you found us. That's the best way to describe how somebody finds us. Don't search for safari, search for overland.
Truly.
And Lee, I want to take this back to you. You've connected with Joshua, and obviously his experience is not entirely unique. There are lots of travelers who may feel like this, feel that sort of overwhelm. And Joshua, you've said that Lee lit the path for you. Can you take me through it, Lee, how your thought process went through what Joshua asked for? He initially came through with an idea of what tour he wanted to do, but it didn't really work out, and you helped redirect him. So how did that work for you?
I think it's the same with any of the tours that we sell. It's about getting to know your passenger and know what's going to suit. So it had to be something that was going to suit a 17-year-old as well as an adult, and not saying that tours are predominantly one way or another. I mean, some are like specifically like 18 to 39-year-olds, and they might be in dorm rooms and that sort of thing. But other tours might be the camping and maybe some slight upgrades along the way. But it's just about connecting with the person and understanding their needs. And, you used Amazon as an example. And straight away I was thinking, like Amazon, you can have 3 products that look exactly the same and they've got 3 different prices. There's a reason why, and it's quality, or there's something down, and maybe the cheapest one is not the best one. Maybe you need that middle range one, you know, or maybe you need the top one, depending on your needs or how long you want the product to last, or, you know, that sort of thing. So it's really the experience that you want out of that. So I think that's where we come into it. And, you know, we're not sitting back and just taking a reservation, because you do get reservations teams. We're consultants, because we actually have to consult and understand what's best for you and what's best for the passenger.
If I can jump in there, I think that's really my Amazon comment is I kind of thought I was going to check a box on a website and we were going to arrive in Johannesburg and start this tour. And it was so not that.
I mean, you probably could do, but what is the experience going to be like? Because you haven't had the guidance along the way, and will you be fully prepared for that? You know, that's another thing. So
I guess it also takes a lot of pressure off of the traveler to try and sort things out themselves, find the hotels or the accommodations or the campsites, you know, everything's sorted for you, which is really nice about overlanding. It gives you that opportunity to just be in the moment and let somebody else handle all the plans for you. And I'm sure that was really, really calming, because your initial planning was also stressful and like, oh my God, there's so many options here. What do I do? And then to find somebody who can actually refine all of that and put it into a cohesive tour for you was probably fantastic. Lee, that obviously comes back to your personalized service and, you know, the way that you connect with your clients. And you've mentioned different ways that you go about matching the right tour to somebody's needs. So how did you go about finding the right tour, you know, given that initial one that Joshua chose, and then picking the 13-day overland Botswana tour?
Yeah, I think the big thing was ticking off like those bucket list items, you know, making sure that there was going to be enough wildlife, because that was the focus of what they were looking for. And that particular 13-day is a very wildlife focused tour for people that are interested in wildlife. Like, you can't get any better. Like, you're right there in the Okavango Delta camping. Like, not every tour is going to offer that exact experience. You know, other people don't want to sleep in a tent in the Okavango Delta, so you would offer them a different experience. That's a big thing for me. And the other thing I like about this tour is, yes, there is, I think the first day or two, I mean, even Joshua will say there's a lot of driving on the first day or two, but with the purpose of going to see rhino and then going into the Okavango to search for the, you know, other wildlife. You can try to tick off the big 5. Not all the trips will go through, especially in Botswana, will give you the opportunity to see rhino, because they're only in that one place. They're looked after and taken care of in that one park. So, you know, if big 5 is your thing, then this tour is more suited than a tour that's going to maybe start in Namibia and go across, because you probably won't see rhino. So.
Thank you so much, Lee. You've also mentioned, Joshua, that there was about a string of 30 odd emails between you and Lee and her signature tagline, if you have any more questions, don't hesitate to ask. Can you share an example of a specific question that you may have had, maybe about packing, perhaps the backpack story, where Lee's detailed and patient answer gave you more confidence and put you more at ease?
Sure. Yeah, it really was 30 back and forth. And over a period of 3 or 4 months, we just kept on the same string, which I really appreciated. So we pack together, the 3 of us, and, you know, try and assemble what we need, and also making sure we don't bring anything we don't need. And one of the pieces we were trying to figure out was the luggage that we were going to bring with us. And I had asked, you know, I read through everything that was on your website, but still feeling like, I don't know if what we've got is going to be too big or too small. And so had asked Lee about that. And Lee came back a few days later with a photo of herself in front of one of the lockers on one of the overland trucks, showing kind of it in proportion to herself and then also to the lockers. And that just really helped us kind of figure out, okay, this is what we have, is going to be fine. And we kind of even just got a little tour of the bus just through that that photo, even though we had seen all the other photos on the site. It was just really very helpful, but also so personal. And that's one thing we just really fell for with our conversations with Lee.
You know, the one thing that sticks out for me is one of the questions that you asked, and Mishka will really appreciate this because we also share this in common. But you asked about books, and Mishka and I talk about books a lot. And one of the books that you said, have you ever heard of this? And I was like, no, I haven't. And I went and I read up on it, and I was like, gosh, this looks so good. And I went and bought it for my dad. Because I was like, this sounds like a fantastic book that you'll enjoy.
You have to share what the book is now.
I don't remember the title, but it was about I think it's actually called Drifter's Farm or something. It's actually about a farm that was in Zimbabwe. During the historical turmoil and how they defended the farm, it's really interesting. It's a personal story to obviously that family.
Yeah, it's about this farm in Zimbabwe during the time, and the farm had a backpackers called Drifters, and for a hot second I thought they were somehow possibly related to the Drifters tour company that we ended up working with.
Maybe they were very long ago.
maybe I feel like maybe Tammy, one of our consultants who used to work at Drifters, maybe knows a little bit more about it than we do. She has a lot of information about Drifters. I actually had a webinar with her 2 weeks ago on Drifters and a whole experience. That was really lovely. Leah, I just want to come back to you. You've obviously shown that you have unwavering commitment to your clients and the people that you work with. How do you make sure that your travelers are fully prepared? I mean, sending a picture of your own backpack is really going above and beyond, but I like other ways that you make sure your travelers are always prepared.
Obviously everyone's got different needs, and sometimes I'll send a bunch of information and people will be like, I already knew this, but rather be over prepared and then under prepared on a trip. And I do tend to sign all my emails with, let me know if you have any more questions, because I know if I did and I didn't know where to go for those answers, I'd be Googling and probably getting the wrong answer, because Google will throw out a couple of different things, but it's not necessarily the experience you're going to have. And obviously having that experience with the overland tours and the different companies, we kind of know how to guide you, because what you might need with one company, you probably might not need with another company, things like that. So yeah, I mean, I obviously it's important to me, because I think before I went on an overland tour, I asked all those questions.
Rather over prepared than under prepared. That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
I want to touch on, the LGBTQ plus community and how that inclusivity came into that dynamic of your booking. You're one person who's been very open about it, obviously, and not many travelers are, which is it really opens the eyes to a lot of people. So obviously you traveled with your 17-year-old niece, who obviously just turned 18. Congratulations, Hannah. But can you share a bit how you felt celebrated and embraced by Lee, and what it meant to you in terms of planning this entire tour?
Sure. I think it's important just to do a tiny bit of background. As the young people pick their countries, we start with kind of 5. So and they come up with a list of places. And Hannah was pretty focused on the African continent, but had several options. And so she came to us with her list of top 5, and it was, I think, Madagascar, Mauritius, Botswana, Uganda, and maybe South Africa. And so I said, so I know about this list, and I'm like, so Hannah, I would like you to go back and take a look at how some of those countries are for LGBT folks. Like, I need you to do a little homework, because it was an obvious outlier here. Uganda, it's not safe. At least everything that I have learned and have seen, it's just not safe for LGBT folks to just be there. And also, even if we weren't going to get hurt, I didn't want to support a place that was hurting folks. And so she came back and said, well, I learned that we're not going to Uganda. It's like, okay, so fine. That was great. We knocked the country off. And so eventually we did land on Botswana, which was a bit more queer friendly. And so that was really how we wanted to make sure it was going to be safe for us and for her, because, I've promised my brothers I'd bring their kids back, right? So we needed to make sure that everything was safe, and Botswana just really checked all those boxes. Of course, we started in South Africa and ended in Zimbabwe, but everything we had kind of picked up was we're going to be fine for our little unit, our little kind of not so traditional family unit. I mean, two men traveling with a young woman in this case, that could look kind of odd. So we had to be careful about that.
Yes, and the other thing with Botswana and South Africa's got it to an extent is they make you get and I remember following up with you a couple of times. Don't forget the unabridged birth certificate for Hannah and letters from her parents, because Botswana, I think Namibia and South Africa went through this for a while, very strict on things like that because of child trafficking and the precautions. So they have all these structures in place to protect travelers, which is really nice. I mean, it's really good, that you're safe traveling through there.
Yeah, we really appreciated all the concern they were taking, because this could look like an odd situation, and so Lee really helped us walk through. Make sure you've got all this paperwork so that you are going to protect yourselves and don't have any trouble. But I don't mind having to go through that paperwork rigmarole, because it's good for everyone.
Yeah.
It's great that Lee helped alleviate some of the stress and some of the concerns that you may have had. I also really like the approach that you take with your niece and your nephews. It's a lot of not just taking you on a trip. You need to do a little bit of research. You need to do some things and figure out where you're actually going. Why is there such a big focus on that for you?
I've lived 4 years outside of the United States. Got very, really was formative in my younger years, I should say, and just really wanted to give my nieces and nephew the opportunity to get outside of the country for a while at a formative part of their lives. So these trips are always when they're in their around 17 or 18. It's not necessarily a high school graduation present or anything. It's just something that Jay and I want to do with them. And so we are doing this with each of them. It's a very long planning process. It takes about a year. It is entirely the young person focused. They make all the decisions. They decide where we're going to go, what we're going to do, when we're going to go. Of course, we're paying for it all, but they really do make those decisions. And the reason it's important, because I want them to see that there's more to the world than the country we live in. And I live in a very diverse country, and I appreciate that. I also think that there's benefit in getting to somewhere where people don't look like you, people don't talk like us. Even though we were in South Africa and Botswana, where just about everybody speaks English, they were also speaking many, many other languages. One of our tour guides with drifters, I believe Stephen told us he spoke 7 languages from 3 language families, which was tremendous, right? Just so new. So anyone we ran into, the fellow from the gas station to the person selling us water, he was just flipping in and out of different languages. Of course, we didn't know what they were, but that just really gave us an appreciation for diversity.
Really, really like that. You're looking for an extra niece.
You would have to get in line.
I remember because there was a point when you were like, you're going to extend a few days in Victoria Falls, and we were chatting about it and chatting about options, and you said, no, I'm going to let Hannah do the research and decide where we'll stay. And I was like, that's so cool, because it actually, that's one thing you learn about when you're looking for a hotel or a property. Like, you have to read the reviews and you have to look up and see what people say. And sometimes you have to really maybe be critical of reviews, because maybe I was telling the team the other day, I read one where all the reviews were 5-star except for one who gave them a 1 star and said that the pillows felt like concrete. And I was like, you just know there's more to that than rating a hotel 1 star and saying the pillows feel like concrete and everyone else said it was a 5-star experience. Like, there's more to that story.
Yeah. So basically, behind what Lee is saying is that so every second Tuesday of the month we have a team meeting, and we don't take it on as like a usual team meeting where you're talking about budgets and you're talking about everything that's gone on. But we talk about general things. Some people talk about gratitude, other people talk about what they've learned in the week, different principles and stuff like that. And Lee chatted to us about reviews and things that she's heard about a certain place and how it changed her own perspective. And I guess after she had gone and see it. And I guess it comes to my next question. Based on reviews, news and social media discourse can sometimes paint a certain picture of certain destinations and things like that. How do you Joshua, navigate these perceptions versus what's actually happening on the ground?
It's a huge question.
What was that?
That's quite a huge question, Michelle.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah.
I think there are probably two parts to that answer. One is choosing various news sources. That's an important one. But I think that also just getting on the ground, being where we are. Now, I'm never going to put myself in danger. I'm not that kind of a thrill seeker. This wasn't doing that. And so getting ourselves into a place where we knew we weren't going to have any problems, but it's so different than what we know. That's really, I think, the best thing. And that's one of the reasons why we're encouraging our nieces and nephews to take these kinds of trips on their own one day, by showing them, hey, we can go to Africa, or the three of us with another niece, we can go to Thailand, or we've also been to Costa Rica, and in August we're taking actually Hannah's twin brother to Peru. Well, I should say he's taking us there, but we're and that was there was a couple of years ago where Peru was actually having its own political difficulties, and there were some and it was not safe for travelers at the time, so that's all calmed down now. And so keeping your eye on government warnings and stuff like that is also helpful for us. We haven't really seen any problems like that with Africa, at least the places that we're trying to go to. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but it's what I got.
Definitely. It definitely cleared up some concerns, and I hope that this will encourage people out there to see beyond what is at face value. Do your research, ask lots of questions, especially if you're working with consultants like Lee, who are ever ready for all of your questions, obviously, at any time. So ask the questions, seek trusted advisors, and you should always, this is what you would do in general cases anyway. You don't really go anywhere and not ask for somebody's advice, which is really smart.
Mishka, just like saying that, and with like maybe the safety concern, all the suppliers we work with would not take you into a place if they felt it was unsafe. So we've had, trips ahead of time say we're not going to go to this area for now because this is happening. And when they feel like it's safe to travel there again, then they do open up to us again. So it is always a concern to put the passengers' safety first,
Safety first. Thanks, Lee. That was a really good thought that you brought up. Thank you so much. I want to touch on Hannah's first experience in Africa. What was it like seeing it through her eyes? Somebody who's an engaging teenager and now alongside all of these adults.
Well, let's be clear. It was also my first time to Africa, so that was, it was exciting for Jay and I as it was for Hannah. But I do have one particular moment that I thought of when you asked this question. We were, I don't remember which camp, but we were out doing a day trip, and there was an elephant very close to the road. In fact, for a while it was across the road. And on these tours, we do not bother the animals. We let them kind of meander as they need to, but we had to get through. So we were waiting patiently. And then as the elephant kind of scooted off the road a little bit, it was just to the side of the road. And I took out my phone and just started doing some video of the elephant as we were driving past it. And we were like, its tush was just about to touch our van. Like, it was really close. And Hannah is watching it. And then she turns around to me and has a face like, wow. And that face, that video was worth the trip because it was everything that she had hoped for. And then she wanted to get up close with the creatures, and that was just one example of getting really close. But it was also the wow, the wonder in her face that really kind of struck me, to answer your question.
That gave me goosebumps when you said that with her expression.
Yeah, like you actually have to share the video with us. We want to see you caught it on video and what it was like. I'm sure she's got plenty of memories to choose from. But you've mentioned a really great one, but were there any other, I can't believe I'm seeing this moments?
I was trying to think of the answer to this question, and I have a couple of quick ones, and then I got a little bit of a story. First of all, the big five are great, but we fell in love with warthogs. We just think they're just the best. So we just had so much fun. Warthogs. It was just kind of wonderful. If you go to the markets, there's these little metal warthogs that they sell. We bought a couple of them for Christmas tree ornaments. Just like we just kind of really, that was a fun one for the three of us. Like we all just kind of adored them. But another one was actually a non-animal related situation that I thought was worth sharing here, because it was one of those kind of, oh, I can't believe this is happening kind of a situation. So our drifters tour had two guides, Solly and Stephen. And when we arrived in Victoria Falls, we stayed at Shearwater, and for a couple of nights that was included with the tour. It's a bit of a pricey hotel, and we tried to get in. In fact, Lee tried to get us in there for a couple more nights, but it was booked. Like it's booked out for years. So we knew we had to move to a different hotel. And so as Lee mentioned, Hannah did some research, and we found a different hotel to spend a couple extra days in Victoria Falls. And I had mentioned this to Stephen that, hey, we got to move from this hotel to another one eventually. What do you recommend? And he said, oh, I got a friend, Mufa, here in Victoria Falls, and he's a cab driver, and he can take you from Shearwater to your other hotel. I said, oh, that's great. Give me his WhatsApp number and I'll call him. He says, oh, no. That's not how that works here. So the next morning, this fellow, Mufa, walks into breakfast, and Stephen introduces us to him and says, Mufa, this is Josh, Mufa, and they need a ride. And basically kind of did this handoff, right? This handoff from Stephen to Mufa, my friend to my friend Josh to my friend Mufa. And so Mufa that afternoon takes us to the new hotel. And then on our trip over there, I said, well, we're going to the airport in a couple of days. Would you drive us out there? Oh yeah, sure. I'll take you out there. And then he gives me his WhatsApp number. Now I have it. And then I said, well, you know what? We're doing this other thing. In between the two, we're going over to Zambia for a day. Would you take us to the border? And so Mufa said, I'd be happy to. So he drives us over to the border, and I figured he was going to drop us off at the border, and then we would find another cab back to our hotel. Oh, no, this isn't how this is going to work. Mufa walks us across the border, and at the Zambia border introduces us to his friend Dennis, and basically hands us off to Dennis and says, this is my friend Josh, this is my friend Dennis. Dennis is going to take care of you for the day. And so then Dennis drives us around Livingston and the park over there and spends the whole day with us, and then brings us back to the border. And I didn't even know it. He'd already WhatsApped to Mufa saying they're on their way, they're crossing the bridge. And then we came back, and Mufa was there to pick us up. And this was this kind of this handoff from trusted person to trusted person. And like, I knew I could trust Dennis because I trusted Stephen, via Mufa. It was an incredible experience. It was very loving, very kind, very compassionate, and also just friendly. And at the before we left Victoria Falls, we actually went out to dinner with Mufa and his family. We had just become fast friends with them, and it was just very sweet, very loving. And that was one of those, wow, this is why we do this thing. This is why we do it.
I think those are one of the moments where you were supposed to cry, Joshua. I think that's
it was.
It would have made the entire story perfect.
I was going to say, Zimbabweans are just so amazing. Like, they are just such amazing people. Like,
yeah.
I'm purely taken aback by the hospitality that you experienced, and just the way that you felt so comfortable to be, as you said, shifted over from Stephen to the next person, and just fully trust that person to take you on a journey. And I mean, that's a very different way to look at it. Often when people think about, oh, they're coming to Africa to experience something amazing, they're thinking of the landscape, they're thinking of the wildlife, the beauty. But what they're not thinking of is the hospitality, the spirit of Ubuntu, the spirit of just being one, which is really, really lovely. Thank you. That was perfect. I mean, we could end the webinar here if we wanted to.
I've got we get a lot of solo female travelers to Africa. Like, we deal with a lot of solo females, and I've got one at the moment, and she's doing some business in Johannesburg through her company. And I emailed her and I said, have you arrived, and what's happening, and are you okay? Because she was very anxious about traveling on her own. And her response to me was, I'm so glad I'm here. Everyone's so friendly. I was like, oh, I'm so glad. It's just like so reassuring to know that she's reassured now that she's here. You know, all the anxiety she had leading up to it is now dissipated and she's just having a good time.
Great.
So, yeah.
You mentioned earlier on that you discovered the term overland, and obviously overlanding is a different type and it has a very unique feel in terms of travel. What did you most enjoy about the style of travel on your particular adventure?
Sure. So first of all, 13 days with a small group, because while our bus could hold 13 or so, Lee, we only had 5, the 3 of us, and then this lovely Swiss German couple. And then of course Stephen and Solly, our drivers. And whether it had been 14 or the 5, and plus 2 for our drivers, what I loved about it was we were a little kind of driving community. We really got to know one another, and we knew the expectations. Like, we're going to do dishes, and we're going to help out with taking camp down and putting it up. And we wanted that. That was like what we wanted to be, a participatory type of a tour. And I think that the overlanding really offers that kind of participation in everything from cooking to camp to just like taking care of one another. There was one morning where I got a bit of a slower start than I would have preferred, and our Swiss friends just kind of jumped into action and helped me take my tent down, and that was just so sweet. Like, and that's the kind of thing that I think, whether we had been a group of 13 or 5, that's the kind of experience we wanted, and I think that really helps define overland. I'll also tell you one funny thing. On many of the days, we have like these Fitbits, right, that track steps. We got like 30,000 steps one day. I'm like, I didn't do anything except move from my tent to my truck. And then we realized that because of all the bouncy, we got like 30,000 steps every day. I'm like, there's no way. But it was that was kind of one of the funny things when Hannah says, how did I get all these steps? Because we were mostly driving around looking at animals.
That's funny, because I felt the same way when we did my tour in Uganda. I looked at my phone and it counted all the steps. I was like, I don't remember walking anywhere. How did I get this many steps? And then I realized, because then I did like a test. So I put my phone on the seat next to me while the truck was going. And then I saw the numbers going up. I'm like, oh, it's tracking the bouncing. This is not very accurate.
I love it. It helps with the points that you need for your your fitness points.
Right.
Meanwhile,
Lee, back to you. For those who are unfamiliar with the tour that Joshua had done, the 13-day Botswana Overland Tour, take me through the tour, its highlights, and what makes it so unique.
I think, like I said earlier, you know, it's quite a nice trip because it is very wildlife focused, and drifters obviously do have their own camps and things in Botswana, which not every supplier would have. I must say also, as far as tracks go, overland tracks, you know, they are all a bit different. They do actually take up to 16, but I mean, on average, they probably would have between maybe 12 and 14. I think Joshua is lucky he is in such a small group. But they are actually some of the best built trucks out there. And I describe their legroom as like the business class legroom, because some of the other trucks are fitting in 20, 24 people, and your knees are touching the seat in front of you, which is fine, but it's a very different experience. It's kind of nice to be able to stretch your legs out a little bit. So I think that's a huge advantage. The way their guides are trained, obviously they're really well trained, highly trained guides. So yeah, I mean, I think all in all, it's a really good option. It is an option that we do sell a lot of, but like I say, we've got a few Botswana tours depending on the people, so we do always match it. But it is one of my favorites, my personal favorites. So it is one that I recommend, because I do think it's good value.
Yeah. I mean, we had that webinar with drifters like 2 weeks ago, and they were talking about the floor to ceiling type of windows where you can like open them up and like properly see out. Just get the best imagery. What is your favorite parts of the truck, Joshua?
What was that?
The favorite parts of the truck.
Oh, Well, like Lee said, they're well built. In fact, the way that the mechanics of how the kitchen kind of just unfolds from under the bus is tremendous. It's a mechanical genius. It's really cool. You got to see it to believe it. How this thing just kind of unfolds into a kitchen. It's so cool. My favorite parts was, so you're kind of sitting on top of the drivers a little bit, and so the front windows are unobscured, and so we got great views. Really from wherever you're sitting in the truck. We were very clear with our fellow passengers that we'd be happy to move around, but eventually we all kind of just found our own seats and didn't move around. And so it turns out that Jay and Hannah and I were in the front seats, and our friends were just behind us. So we all had just great views. And being high up also, because the truck is quite high up off the ground, to have all that equipment below it really gets you a good view. And one of the best, most kind of amazing wildlife sightings was I don't know if you call it a herd, but a bunch of giraffe ran across the road just in front of the truck. And fortunately the driver was aware and slowed down real quick. But like one of the giraffe, basically his nose was right against the window, and like we were right there looking at this tall giraffe, but from our tall seats in the tall bus. It was quite something. I wish I got that on video, but that was one for the memories. You're not going to catch that on video.
No. You have to kind of think fast, and by the time you got your camera out, it's gone.
It's gone. Yeah. It's one of those moments where you just, you know what, the memory is in my head, and if I'm going to share it with somebody else, they need to go and experience for themselves.
Yeah.
I must say they're the only ones that have a kitchen quite like that. It's like the MasterChef kitchen of overland trucks, because it just all of a sudden appears. Everything slides out.
Before I asked Joshua about what was his favorite parts of the truck, Lee, you were trying to say something. Sorry for cutting you off there.
I think I was going to say about the kitchen. I was going to say, the windows. They've got those windows in the front, but Joshua did mention it. I think they didn't used to. I think they kind of cut those windows in so that you could see front forwards over where the drivers are sitting even. So you've got that forward view and side view. You might not find that on every truck. So
but that's also the nice thing about, working with people like African Overland Tours, not to toot our own horn, but thankfully we're not bound by one operator. We have many options for people to choose from. It can be a little bit overwhelming, but that's why you get the opportunity to speak to people like Lee, make it easier for you.
Yeah, and some people want to be in a bigger group, some people want to be in a smaller group, and the nice thing is that we can also check like tour dynamics and who else is booked onto not the actual passenger names, but we can check where they're from maybe. So you've got an idea of the kind of passengers you're going to be traveling with, which I think is quite useful, because we might say, this trip is predominantly has German travelers. Would you rather travel on this date? There's a bit of a mix, it's just to match people correctly with a group.
Speaking of matchingly, you haven't really gone into, and I'd like to, the how we kind of got onto that particular tour. So on the website I had said, hey, we want to do this tour, and Lee came back and said, actually that tour is for, I think it was like 18 to 35 year olds, which you are neither. We were 17 and in our 50s, but quickly found us another tour around the same period of time that was called a family tour. So it was going to be more intergenerational, which is really fit our needs. Now, at the end of the day, we ended up with a couple of 35-year-olds and then us, which was lovely. They were right between our ages. But that was, something that Lee really helped us, because I was really clear, this is who we are. We're two 50-year-old guys and a young woman, and this is the unit that we are traveling with, and we need to kind of figure this out. Like, Hannah has to have her own tent. We're going to share one. Everyone's got to be cool with that. And so, from a LGBT point of view, the title of our talk today is Lee really kind of helped us navigate and find a tour that was going to accommodate this rather unique family dynamic. And I really appreciated that.
All stars for Lee. They all go to you today. We've actually got a very interesting question, and I think, Lee, you'd be able to answer this one. We've got Julia asking, could you tell me if I need to get vaccinated? Were there any vaccinations that you needed to take, Joshua or Lee? Are there any just general vaccinations that people need to take?
For Botswana, nothing compulsory. Just obviously anti-malaria is always recommended, but depends when you're traveling, if it's high season or not high season. The only thing that would be compulsory in Africa would be yellow fever for East Africa. So that's a must. Other than that, yeah, I do think though, a lot of countries or doctors will recommend other precautions. So like they might recommend like hepatitis or yeah, so just a few things like that, and that's totally discretional. It's not compulsory.
And it also depends on the regions you're traveling to. Different regions may have different ones, you know.
Exactly, and we will point people in the right direction. Say like, this is what you have to have, and then chat to your doctor about anything additional. Because I know once when I was young, I was in the UK and I went to the NHS and I said I'm going back to South Africa, and they gave me a list of things injections that I had to have, and I was like, wow, I lived there, and I never have all of these. I was like, okay, if you insist, I want to be healthy.
Awesome. There's actually something that I wanted to quickly hop on and talk about. I took a sneak peek from one of your emails between Joshua and you, Lee, and you mentioned that you figured out that he's a writer, and Joshua, that you are planning on writing almost a cross between a memoir, travel log, and a how-to on traveling with your nieces and nephews. Obviously, part of the key message you've mentioned is that you want people to understand that there are places other than the country that you're living in. But are there any other things that you want to convey in that travel log about transformational travel experiences, maybe?
Sure. It's tentatively titled Outward Bound, a guide to traveling with teens, and it's going to be our experience of these 5 trips and what we've learned about traveling with teens, and also how teen-centric or young person-centric we want them to be. And I've described that already, so I don't have to repeat it. And what we're going to be doing with this is just kind of what I'm going to be doing is writing, here's this experience, and then here's what you would want to do. And I can go back to the question you just had about vaccinations. We always have ourselves and the young people go to a travel nurse. We want them to understand that health abroad, or well, health period, but health when you're traveling abroad is so important. And so even in a country like Botswana, where vaccinations are compulsory, that's how you find out that, oh yeah, you do need malaria tablets when you go, if you're in Victoria Falls, because it's kind of mosquito country over there. And so then what I'm going to write is, here's our experience with traveling with the kids and our travel nurse, and then here's the kind of things to do. And so also the piece we already talked about, the documentation. If you're traveling with someone who's not family, these are the kinds of pieces of paper that you need to bring along with you and hold on to. So that's kind of the whole idea of the how-to guide. And then the memoir part is just, how did this affect my relationship, improve my relationship? Improve is not the right word. Enhance my relationship with these young people. And also, how is it helping with Jay and I and my husband and I in our relationship? Because it's really, we don't have our own children. These are the young people in our lives. And so how are these trips really making us closer, get to know one another better, and then just kind of deeply fall in love with these kids who we've always loved, but these trips just have that extra special relationship once we've had one of these trips with these kids. Now we've done 3 of them and we're all about to embark on number 4. There's definitely a different special relationship with each of them following the trip. And that's really what I'm trying to convey, is how travel can enhance and make a relationship more beautiful.
I think you've summed it up perfectly. I mean, you definitely have. Talking to you today has enlightened a lot in me, and I'm really thankful for that. I don't know, I'm sure the next person will also feel the same once they listen to this, because I'm going to be sending this to everybody. Everybody. Be ready to be sick of me. But again, thank you so much for sharing, and we can't wait to see the end result. I hope that you would share it with us as well, and we would love to share it with our community as well. That would be really great. I think that you've covered up everything that I wanted to talk about. I mean, you've even given some great advice for your community, the LGBTQ+. Is there anything else, any other pieces of advice that you'd want to give to the queer community or people thinking of traveling to Africa but have reservations?
Well, this actually, it's not specific about traveling to Africa, but a big one is just, let's go. Let's get out there. We have to be thoughtful. We have to be culturally appropriate. But I don't want anything, whether it's an ability, whether it's being LGBT, being a single woman, as Lee mentioned. We can figure out how to do this, and that's exactly why why Jay and I are doing what we're doing with our nieces and nephews. We want to show them, yeah, it's a big world and it can be a little scary, but it also is navigable and you can do it. And we want to inspire them, and I guess with this podcast, inspire you.
It reminds me of that saying, travel is the only thing you spend money on that makes you richer.
I like that.
The first time I heard it, it took me a while to get my head around, and I was like, how do you get richer? And then I was like, no. It's like, uplifting experience, the bonding. There's so much that comes from travel.
I think it's just so much more rewarding. It may not be tangible, but at the end of you can't hold it in your hand, and you can't put a price on it. But it's just, there's memories that you have created that will stick with you forever, and you get to share that with other people. Like, I'm sure, Joshua, you share that in your community with everyone that you speak to. I'm sure you're like, you've got to go here, you've got to go there. I don't know, like, maybe that is
like with Africa in particular. Like what one of our other clients said is, she's like, she's traveled all over the world, but she's never truly left Africa. She obviously is back home, but she feels like she's never left, and she keeps coming back.
You've actually said that as well. I think in the first podcast that I did with Lee said, I've lived outside of South Africa so many times, and I've always just wanted to come back.
Oh yeah, I've always moved back. I'm always just drawn back to Africa. Well, in fact, I'd love to live in Botswana, but
in a tent or in accommodation. In a tent or in accommodation.
Oh no, I'd like to live in a house in Botswana, not in a tent.
I just needed to make sure. Well, guys, thank you so much. I actually this is the first time that I'm doing this, so please be kind to me. But I decided to do like a quick fire round, safari style type of thing. So literally, I'm just going to throw some questions your way. And the first thing that comes to your head, just go ahead. Lee, feel free to jump in. Okay.
That's scary.
First one, bucket list animal to see in the wild.
Warthog.
I was going to say leopard.
Packing MVP, one item you couldn't have lived without.
Lamp.
Most wow moment of the trip.
Crossing the bridge with Mufa.
That's so cool.
Biltong or jerky?
Oh, it has to be biltong.
We tried the Bolton, but I don't know the difference between Bolton and jerky.
Campfire chat or a sunrise game drive?
Sunrise. I like taking pictures of sunrises.
Yeah, I like sunrise, but I do enjoy the campfire chats at the end of the night. And also because, just to add to that, you've got the hot and warm fire and the crackling, and you can hear little noises and bugs and birds in the bush around you, and it's just special.
One song that takes you back to Africa.
I know. Toto Africa.
Rains down in Africa became our theme song.
Same one, yeah. Most unexpected useful tip that Lee gave you.
It's gonna be fine.
First thing you told someone when you got home.
Warthogs.
Next dream destination.
Well, we're going to Peru in August.
One word to describe your African Overland Tour.
gorgeous.
I love it. Well, that concludes this podcast. Thank you guys so much for joining. The recording will be up in a couple of hours. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Joshua, huge thanks to you. Your insights are amazing. You have brought so much of love and joy into my afternoon. Thank you so much. And Lee, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. I know that you have a lot going on. So thank you so much. Cool.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Joshua.
Bye.
Bye.